this webisode series, which is focusing on gallbladder cancers from today. So the gallbladder cancer will be covered in approximately 4 sessions, and each session will be focusing on various aspects of gallbladder cancer. And today we are covering overview and approach towards gallbladder cancers. So I welcome all the eminent faculties. Welcome Dr. Kapoor, who is a gastro surgeon from Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Hospital, Jaipur. Welcome, sir. And today's panel discussion will be moderated by Dr. Suresh Singla, who is a gastrosurgeon from Max Hospital, Vaishali, and co-moderated by Dr. Nikhil. And Dr. Nikhil is a gastro-oncosurgeon in Max Hospital, Saket. So our eminent panelist would be Dr. Kapoor and Dr. Pankaj Garg, who is a surgical oncologist in Sri Guru Ram Rai Institute of Medical and Health Sciences, Dehradun. Dr. Rakesh Kumar Singh, who is a gastrosurgeon in Indira Gandhi Institute of Medical Sciences, Patna, and Dr. Swapnil Patel, who is a surgical oncologist in Tata Memorial Cancer Center, Varanasi. So I welcome all of my eminent faculties, and now without wasting time, I hand over the stage to Dr. Kapoor to deliver a lecture on approach and overview of gallbladder cancer. So please take over.
Can you see my slides?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They are visible. And I request everybody to have their mic on mute, please, so that we can enjoy this academic feast. Thank you.
And I'm well audible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. You are well audible.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nikhil and Shefali, for asking me to give an overview of gallbladder cancer. Some of you may not know, very recently, I have moved from SGPGI Lucknow, where I served for more than 3 decades, to Mahatma Gandhi Medical College Hospital in Jaipur, primarily because it gives me 5 more years to continue to interact with the students as a teacher. So students, please take a note of my email address. In case you want to read more about any aspect of gallbladder cancer, please feel free to email me. Just write the topic which you want to study or read about gallbladder cancer in the subject of the mail, and wait for a few days. I will send you some reading material. So the first thing that we ought to know about gallbladder cancer is its epidemiology. Although it is the commonest biliary tract cancer, more common than even cholangiocarcinoma, about which we read so much in the Western literature, but it is not a common cancer as far as the Western world is concerned. In the US, UK, and Western Europe, the incidence in females, which is higher than in males, is only 1 per 100,000 per year. But the incidence rates of gallbladder cancer have peculiar geographical distribution. In countries in Central and South America, such as Chile, and in some small countries in Eastern and Central Europe, the incidence rates are as high as 7 to 9 per 100,000 per year in women. Countries in East Asia like Japan, China, and Korea are somewhere in the middle with incidence rates of 5 per 100,000 per year. And in India, especially North India, because there is a huge North-South divide, the incidence rates are even higher. And in Delhi, they are 10 per 100,000 per year. And in women in Delhi, gallbladder cancer is the commonest non-gender organ-related cancer, because the only other cancers which are more common in women than gallbladder cancer are breast, cervix, and ovary. Also, it has peculiar ethnic distribution. Even in the US or in the American continents, the incidence rates in the Native American Indian population is much higher than the incidence rates in the whites or the Black population. And because gallbladder cancer is common in both Asian and American Indians, about 2 decades ago, I said that gallbladder cancer is an Indian disease. The other important point about gallbladder cancer is the confusion and kind of non-uniformity as far as its nomenclature is concerned in relation to the time when the diagnosis of gallbladder cancer is either suspected or made. And we've been saying that if there are symptoms and signs to suggest gallbladder cancer. For example, dull, continuous right upper abdominal pain, maybe with jaundice, maybe with gastric outlet obstruction, anorexia, weight loss, and there is a firm to hard lump palpable in the gallbladder area, then this is obvious gallbladder cancer. If the clinical picture is like gallstone disease, but imaging, which would be an ultrasound, suggests that there is something wrong, then this becomes a suspected gallbladder cancer. If even ultrasound is normal, but during the cholecystectomy, you find that things are not like normal non-malignant gallbladder, then it should be called an unsuspected gallbladder cancer. And only if everything is fine till the specimen examination and the pathologist for the first time reports that there is a malignancy, that should be called incidental gallbladder cancer. I am emphasizing this because many reports include even the second and the third category as incidental gallbladder cancer, which in our opinion is not correct. Unfortunately, in our healthcare system, we also see patients in whom either the gallbladder was not subjected to histology, or even if the histology was done, it did not show malignancy, and then the patient presents with a recurrence after a few months, and this is what we call a missed gallbladder cancer. Unfortunately, clinically obvious gallbladder cancer is usually in advanced stages, and therefore you should very carefully and diligently look for signs of metastasis, supraclavicular node, umbilical nodule, ascites, perrectal or pervaginal deposits. Because if any of these are present, then this patient probably does not require any further investigation and definitely not surgical management. So the clinical examination should be very thorough if you suspect or diagnose gallbladder cancer based on history and examination. If history and examination do not suggest gallbladder cancer and the diagnosis is gallstone disease, then obviously the first investigation will be ultrasound. But we must request our radiology colleagues that when they do an ultrasound for gallstone disease, especially in North India, they should look not only at presence or absence of stones, they should also evaluate the gallbladder wall. And if there is something wrong there, which is frequently thickening, then they should also carefully look for evidence of metastasis either in the liver or in the lymph nodes, especially distant lymph nodes like aortocaval. The most favorable finding on ultrasound in gallbladder cancer is an intraluminal mass lesion with either no or minimal liver infiltration. These are the patients who are eminently resectable for cure. If ultrasound raises a suspicion, which means that either there is thickening of the wall of the gallbladder, or there is a mass, or there is a polyp, then the patient should have a proper triple phase contrast enhanced CT scan. And in the CT also, both radiologist and us should very carefully look for any evidence of dissemination or metastasis, such as an omental deposit, an enlarged distant like aortocaval, para-aortic, superior mesenteric or celiac lymph node. And if any of these nodes is enlarged, then it should be targeted either under ultrasound or CT guidance, or better still, as advocated by Dr. Anil Agarwal from GB Pant Hospital, under EUS guidance, because these nodes are lying just behind the third part of the duodenum. So you put your EUS scope there and the lymph node is just there and an FNAC can be done. Because if any of these nodes is positive, then again, it is as good or as bad as metastatic disease, and the patient probably does not require any surgical intervention or will not benefit from surgical intervention. Now, if CT shows no metastasis and possibly resectable disease, then there is now more and more evidence coming in that PET scan is useful, because gallbladder cancer is a biologically aggressive disease. So every attempt has to be made to find out whether there is extra-abdominal or distant intra-abdominal disease, because in these patients, surgical intervention is not going to help. So if cost and availability is not a constraint, then probably PET scan should be done. There is a report from Tata Memorial Hospital which talks of the role of PET scan even in incidental gallbladder cancer. I'll discuss it at the end. That in T1B incidental gallbladder cancer, where there is a debate whether the patient should or should not be reoperated for what we call a completion extended cholecystectomy, they say that in T1B disease, if the PET is negative, then in all patients that they reoperated, they found no residual disease, and therefore they make a suggestion that these patients may not be reoperated and just kept under follow-up surveillance. A very frequent question which is asked in the exam and students are not clear about it is the role of tissue diagnosis. Whether and when should tissue diagnosis be obtained? Now, the standard answer and practice should be that if the disease is resectable, then tissue diagnosis is not required, is not recommended. Not required because even if it is negative, you would still resect, you should still resect. Not recommended because this entails a significant risk of needle track and peritoneal spread of the disease. So if you are planning to operate, if the disease is resectable, tissue diagnosis should not be obtained. If you are not operating, if the disease is not resectable, if you want to give neoadjuvant treatment for loco-regionally advanced disease, or as an exception, if you anticipate a major resection like an extended right hepatectomy or a hepatopancreatoduodenectomy, then some surgeons would want to have a tissue diagnosis because you don't want to end up doing a major procedure with significant mortality and morbidity and end up having a negative tissue diagnosis. Because we all know that an entity called xanthogranulomatous cholecystitis can exactly look like gallbladder cancer in terms of mass lesion and even infiltration. So some surgeons would insist on a tissue diagnosis only if a major resection is anticipated, but not as a routine. Now, what is unresectable? I am talking of unresectable because majority of the cases will be unresectable. So if the proper hepatic artery or the main portal vein are involved, it is unresectable. Unlike cholangiocarcinoma, where there is a role and place for vascular resection, especially portal vein resection. Involvement of the pancreas and duodenum, I put a question mark because it depends on your philosophy. If you are willing to do a pancreatoduodenectomy, then it is resectable. If not, then it is unresectable. For duodenum alone, without pancreatic involvement, a significant experience reported again by Dr. Anil Agrawal from G.B. Pant Hospital with either sleeve or segmental resection of duodenum without PD can achieve an R0 resection margin and good results. Distant nodes like celiac, superior mesenteric, or aortocaval, as I mentioned earlier, are as bad as distant metastasis and make the disease unresectable. So what is resectable is disease confined to the gallbladder with liver infiltration, infiltration of omentum and colon, which are dispensable organs, and lymph nodes confined to the hepatoduodenal ligament. What is not mentioned is retropancreatic or retroduodenal, posterior pancreatic or duodenal nodes, where there is a debate and difference of opinion. While the Western surgeons, especially in the US, say that these nodes are distant nodes and they don't operate upon these patients, the Japanese say that no, these are regional nodes and we should still operate, although the prognosis is not as good as HDL nodes alone. And most Indian centers, including us, follow the Japanese philosophy, which means that if only posterior pancreatoduodenal nodes are involved or enlarged, we would still resect. Once you have decided to operate upon the patient, we strongly recommend that in each and every patient, you must put in a telescope and look for distant metastasis. Because these small surface deposits on the surface of liver, diaphragm, peritoneum, omentum, viscera may not be picked up even with a good CT scan or PET scan. And they will be seen only on staging laparoscopy. This is staging, not diagnostic laparoscopy, as some students and unfortunately some teachers also say. And any suspicious area should be excised and sent for frozen section. Because if it is positive, no matter what you do, the outcome is going to be poor. So NCCN makes a strong consideration, but we say strong recommendation for staging laparoscopy in every patient. And again, the G.B. Pant Hospital group says that with little bit of skill, you can even do a laparoscopic aortocaval lymph node biopsy after complete cauterization of the duodenum. So once the disease is resectable, that means there are no metastases, even on staging laparoscopy, you do a resection, which includes obviously the gallbladder, a part of liver, how much is debatable, lymph nodes, which lymph nodes I will discuss. There is more debate about bile duct. Most groups do not resect the bile duct as a routine a part of extended or radical cholecystectomy and do it only selectively. Pancreas and duodenum I've already discussed, and hepatic artery and portal vein involvement are contraindications for resection. There is no role, no place for vascular resection in gallbladder cancer as opposed to hilar cholangiocarcinoma. So the standard operation for a resectable gallbladder cancer is what we call an extended or radical. They are basically synonyms. Cholecystectomy, which includes a wedge of liver, non-anatomical, in segment 4B and 5, usually 2, some people say 3 centimeter, lymph nodes in the entire hepatoduodenal ligament from the porta hepatis to the superior border of duodenum and pancreas, and then lymph nodes behind the duodenum and pancreas after complete extended cauterization of the duodenum, but not aortocaval or para-aortic nodes, and lymph nodes along the common hepatic artery to the right of celiac axis. So it's not a complete celiac node dissection. And all this can be done and has been shown to be done laparoscopically also if you have the skill and expertise. Patients with clinically obvious or advanced gallbladder cancer frequently have jaundice, and then it becomes a difficult problem to handle. This recent meta-analysis has shown that presence of jaundice, the resectability rate is low. You are less likely to achieve an R0 resection. You need more major resections to do, and you need more vascular reconstruction and resection and reconstruction, which anyway are not recommended. And in spite of all this, the morbidity and mortality being high, but the outcome is worse as compared to patients without jaundice. And therefore, this report says, or this review says, that jaundice is a contraindication to curative resection, but they qualify the statement by saying that it may be done and can be done in highly selected cases in experienced centers. If there are any questions related to this, I will discuss it during the discussion time. Now, major liver resection such as extended right hepatectomy, which would be required in 2 situations. One, if there is a tumor in the neck of the gallbladder, which is infiltrating the liver, because that means the right portal pedicle is very close, and you cannot achieve even 1 centimeter margin without sacrificing the right portal pedicle. So you have to do a right hepatectomy, which in gallbladder cancer is never alone. It is always combined with a part or whole of segment 4. So it is an extended right. Or it could be a large tumor in the fundus or body of the gallbladder with extensive, more than 2-3 centimeter involvement of liver parenchyma, which cannot be handled by extended or radical cholecystectomy. So you have to do a right hepatectomy. But unfortunately, for some unknown strange reasons, the liver resection for gallbladder cancer, as opposed to when it is done for liver cancer or cholangiocarcinoma, is associated with high mortality. Even a recent series has shown 9% or 13% mortality. Only one series which shows no mortality in 30 patients. So the mortality of major liver resection, more than 2 segments in gallbladder cancer, for some reason is high. The reasons could be, one, these patients are frequently jaundiced, and because of biliary obstruction, they may also have biliary sepsis. And third could be the aggressive biology of the disease. Patients who have both liver as well as pancreatoduodenal involvement may require what is known as an HPD. HPD means a major liver resection with PD. If you do extended chole with PD, that is not an HPD. So the largest experience on HPD comes from Nagoya University, but they also did only about 2 patients per year. And in their hands, the mortality was as high as 1 in 5. Median survival was less than a year, and actual 5-year survivors were only 3 out of 38. So based on this dismal experience, they concluded about 2 years ago that the indication for this procedure in gallbladder cancer, as opposed to a multifocal, multicentric cholangiocarcinoma, where it is useful, is questionable. And they say it is a technical resection, but oncologically, probably this indicates unresectability. A word about adjuvant therapy. Obviously, any patient who has an R1, which means margin positive, or R2 resection, which means gross residual disease, requires adjuvant treatment. Even if you have achieved an R0 resection, if the disease is, some people say even T2, but definitely T3 or node positive, if it is a papillary tumor like this, which is often multicentric, and if there are poor histological features like perineural invasion, lymphovascular invasion, pericapsular invasion in the lymph node, tumor budding, And in case of incidental gallbladder cancer, if there was bile spill during the index cholecystectomy, all these patients must receive post-resection adjuvant therapy, which is usually chemotherapy, usually gemcitabine based. But the evidence is not very strong. A systematic review of 27 articles showed that the evidence for adjuvant chemotherapy is moderate, for chemoradiotherapy it is poor, and radiotherapy alone is very poor. There is some soft data emerging in as far as the role of neoadjuvant chemo or chemoradiotherapy in loco-regionally advanced gallbladder cancer, which is possibly unresectable, is concerned. Now, majority of patients with gallbladder cancer, as I mentioned earlier, are unresectable and they need palliation from biliary obstruction, gastric outlet obstruction, and pain. But in today's clinical practice, if you have good therapeutic endoscopy and interventional radiology support, this is almost always non-surgical, endoscopic, percutaneous, and EUS guided. So just an example, how the radiologists and endoscopists together have reconstructed the biliary tree by placing multiple stents in the biliary tree and a stent in the gastroduodenum to relieve biliary and gastric outlet obstruction. At SGPGI, now I don't think we have operated a patient for only palliation in the last 20 years or so. Most of the palliation or almost all palliation is non-surgical. Before I finish, two more aspects. One is incidental gallbladder cancer, which is for the first time detected by the pathologist. And most of these patients, after, of course, the same evaluation, which means ultrasound, chest X-ray, CT scan, PET scan, staging laparoscopy, would require what is called a completion extended cholecystectomy, where we remove the liver wedge and lymph nodes, same as we do in an extended chole. And the resection of CBD and port site are very debatable and controversial issues. Suspected gallbladder cancer, which means the thick-walled gallbladder cancer, but diffuse, uniform, regular thickening of gallbladder wall, especially with these hypo-dense nodules, which is highly suggestive of benign inflammatory disorder. So a low suspicion of malignancy. But still, because it can turn out to be malignant, you don't want to do a simple cholecystectomy and violate the oncological plane, which will deny the chance of cure to the patient. So the procedure required is what we have described is anticipatory extended cholecystectomy. We remove the gallbladder with a small wedge of liver subjected to frozen section. If it is benign, which it should be in 9 out of 10 such cases, that is the end of the operation. If it is malignant, it should be 1 in 10. Then you add a lymphadenectomy and complete the extended cholecystectomy. That is why it is called anticipatory extended cholecystectomy. Just for my young colleagues here, few areas of research which one of you should take as you become a GI or an HPB surgeon. The epidemiology of gallbladder cancer, establish a registry of gallbladder cancer in your hospital, in your city. What is the natural history of asymptomatic gallstones as far as the risk of gallbladder cancer is concerned? Role of various biomarkers, including molecular markers in diagnosis. What is the role of PET scan in staging? There is not strong evidence as yet. Various neoadjuvant and adjuvant treatments, screening for gallbladder cancer and preventive cholecystectomy. And then, of course, along with your basic science colleagues, develop cell lines, animal model for gallbladder. And all of you, even if you're not doing any of this research, should establish a biobank of tissue, blood, stone, bile, and other biomaterial for possible future research. Because if you have a good biobank, any basic scientist will be very happy to collaborate with you and do some research into various aspects of gallbladder cancer. So with that, I would like to finish. If you want to read more, please request your department or institute to subscribe to this treatise on gallbladder cancer, which I have dedicated to these 3 surgical colleagues who have added immensely to our knowledge about gallbladder cancer, Dr. Anil Agarwal, Dr. Anu Bihari, and Dr. V.K. Shukla. Before I end, with the permission of Nikhil, I would like to make 2 announcements. One is the first edition of Jaipur Surgical Festival, which we are organizing on 4th and 5th of December. The theme is cholecystectomy. And this is the website where you can go and register complimentary without any registration fee for online attendance. If you want to come to Jaipur to attend it, then you may have to pay a small amount of registration fee. The other is an educational activity that I have started after moving to Jaipur. It is called Jaipur Surgical Tutorial. Every Saturday, 9 to 10 a.m. If you want to join this class, please send a WhatsApp message with your name and hospital name to my colleague, Dr. Anand Nagar, at this number, who's coordinating the academic activities of Jaipur Surgical Tutorial. So thank you, Nikhil and Shefali, once again for asking me to cover gallbladder cancer and overview. And I will be happy to take any questions or participate in the panel as and when we go along. I'm happy to see Dr. Khandelwal also in the audience, who also has made very significant contribution to gallbladder cancer from North India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kapoor.
This was a very comprehensive presentation, and actually there isn't much left out for panel discussion. You have just summarized everything which are important, especially from the students' point of view. There are a couple of questions from the chat box, and one is, sorry, chat. Sir, you are muted.
You want me to take them?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there is a question from Bhushan Bhalgat. Exactly which group of para-aortic nodes should be aspirated, or is it that all para-aortic nodes should alert us? Yes, when we say aortocaval group of nodes, they include both nodes which are lying in the groove between aorta and IVC, as well as to the left of the aorta. Only word of caution that sometimes retropancreatic, retroduodenal nodes in a thin-built patient who doesn't have much fat may look like aortocaval node, so you have to be cautious. But if it is a true aortocaval or para-aortic node, and if it is positive, it is a distant metastasis. So as I said, they can be targeted under ultrasound, CT, US guidance, laparoscopic, or at laparotomy. Our practice was that even if we don't find any aortocaval node enlarged, whatever soft tissue, loose fibroareolar tissue is there in the aortocaval groove, we will excise it, send it for frozen, and wait for the frozen section report before we proceed with an irreversible step.
Yes, I think that helps. And sir, I have one question. This is regarding a large tumor or tumor which are gallbladder neck. And you said if they are close to the right anterior pedicle, so you would advocate a hepatectomy. But like, sir, with today's scanning, if we see a margin there, like not exactly more than 2 centimeters, but if there is a margin, and if we think that we can get away with the extended hepatectomy by exposing the anterior pedicle, I mean, I can just to make my point a little clearer. Can you see this photo?
Yes, yes.
So if we do something like this, so do you have anything against this, sir?
Yeah, so very right. When we are dealing with a gallbladder neck cancer, we have to evaluate its spread or local involvement very carefully. One, it could be directly involving the CBD and causing jaundice. Two, it could be infiltrating the hepatoduodenal ligament and involving the proper hepatic artery and the main portal vein. Three, it could be going towards the hilum of liver and involve only the right branch of portal vein and right hepatic artery. And four, it could be going into the liver parenchyma and become very close to the right portal pedicle, especially the right anterior sectoral pedicle. So if you have a fortunate situation that it is a small tumor in the neck, which is not infiltrating the liver or the hilum, it is only involving the CBD, then yes, Dr. Nikhil, as he said, you can do an extended or radical cholecystectomy with CBD excision, do a frozen section of the proximal margin, and just do a hepaticojejunostomy. If it is involving the proper hepatic artery and main portal vein, as I said earlier, that indicates unresectability. If it is involving only the right portal pedicle, then obviously you have to do a right hepatectomy. If it is not involving the right portal pedicle and there is no liver infiltration, then yes, there will be some loose tissue, fibroareolar tissue between the GB neck tumor and the liver parenchyma, and then again a liver resection, a major liver resection would not be required. In this scenario, Dr. Subhash Gupta and Shaleen, I remember they have described some cases where only the right hepatic artery was involved, and in presence of a normal right portal vein, no jaundice, you can sacrifice the right hepatic artery or resect and reconstruct it. So you have to evaluate the lesion very carefully and see whether an extended cholecystectomy with CBD excision alone can achieve an R0 resection.
It's very rightly said. And regarding this right hepatic artery, I mean, this is a frequent thing which we have encountered. Like even in my career, I would have done close to 6 such cases where we would have just resected the right hepatic artery, reconstructed maybe 1 or 2, and just 4 or 5 of them were like the distal end was too small for reconstruction, and we just left it at that. And post-operative course was almost okay in all these patients, except maybe elevated transaminases post-op. We didn't find or we didn't encounter anything grossly abnormal, no issues. So that is a very, very valid approach. So I think we have taken
just one request and advice, Nikhil. You must publish this because nobody else has done it so far. People describe it, but this needs to be documented. So please publish it.
Sure, sir. We'll do that. Thank you. And there's one more question, sir, for you.
Yeah, if this is from Asim Jindal, if the tumor from the fundus of the gallbladder is growing towards the colon, what is the current indication for liver wedge resection? Yeah, so I didn't go into that detail. Recently, the AJCC and UICC, they have subclassified T2 into hepatic and peritoneal. Of course, when you say colon involvement, it doesn't remain T2. So it becomes T3 because an adjacent organ involvement. So in T3, there is no debate. So you will do a extended chole and you will do a segmental colonic resection. But in T2, the hepatic and peritoneal side, they did it based on one publication, and then of course more retrospective analysis have come. But my personal opinion about this subclassification is that I don't agree, because my view is that we should be very aggressive towards early resectable gallbladder cancer, and therefore the recommendation that if the tumor is on the peritoneal side, we need not do a liver wedge resection, I personally do not agree.
Sir, one more question is there.
Yeah, Dr. Khandelwal has made a comment that cause of jaundice in GBC may also be due to CBD stones. Yes, very right. That's a very fortunate situation again, because we know that about 60 to 70% of patients with gallbladder cancer have gallstones. So there could be a stone in the CBD which is causing jaundice. That would be very obvious when you do an MR cholangiogram, because all patients with GBC and jaundice, in addition to CT, must have an MR cholangiogram. And then, of course, you can clear the CBD endoscopically and just do an extended cholecystectomy. Very right.
And one more thing, sir, I would slightly more clarification would be required on T1B and PET-CT, because that data is too early, and there was no distinction made between hepatic side and peritoneal side. So I would want you to add some words there.
Yeah, so that publication is again from Tata Memorial Hospital, where they retrospectively looked into patients with T1B where they had got a PET scan. So all these patients were operated. What they found that when the PET was negative, they didn't find any residual disease when they did a completion extended cholecystectomy. So based on this, they made a very soft suggestion, I wouldn't say recommendation, that T1B, if the PET is negative, you may not reoperate. Again, I personally would not do that, because my approach is that in such cases, especially incidental gallbladder cancer, which is almost always early gallbladder cancer, but it should be aggressive. Only thing is that the counseling and consent has to be very detailed. You have to tell the patient that, look, I am operating. There is a possibility that final histology may not show any cancer, either in the liver or lymph node. Then you should not come back and tell me, why did you operate? Because that is the best situation for your patient. These patients have the best outcome amongst all patients with incidental gallbladder cancer. So I would still operate, and I will be happy and will tell the patient to have a good prognosis if the histology doesn't show any residual disease.
Correct, sir. And I mean, there is no end to question. So what about incidental CAGB with bile spill?
Yes. So as I mentioned, bile spill does increase the chance of peritoneal dissemination because it's a very biologically aggressive tumor. We know about the phenomenon of post-site metastasis, one of the causes of which is bile spill, which happens very frequently during lap chole. But I would say that if you know that there was bile spill during index cholecystectomy, that alone should not deny the patient the chance of a possible cure or long-term survival following completion extended cholecystectomy. But definitely the prognosis will be poorer. So these are patients in whom I would give adjuvant therapy after completion extended cholecystectomy, even if I don't find residual disease or otherwise there is no indication. So bile spill alone would become an indication for adjuvant therapy, but I would still do completion extended cholecystectomy.
So theoretically, sir, do you see a role of HIPEC here?
Preventive HIPEC.
Theoretically, just curious.
Yeah.
Research question rather.
Yeah. I don't know whether it will be an overkill, but because HIPEC has its own problems. One is the logistics, second is cost, and then of course the morbidity. So yes, you may say that yes, it may help, but I'm not sure whether I would do it.
Yeah, so that was just thinking aloud, sir. I mean, no question there.
But Dr. Nikhil, carcinoma GB is not very chemosensitive, so I don't think HIPEC will have much effect.
Agreed. Yeah, so maybe, may not be. And
yeah, Saket wants to know that there is no obvious metastasis, but there is moderate ascites. Yeah, so you see, ascites in gallbladder cancer or in any cancer can be nutritional or metastatic. So if you think it's nutritional, which means that the patient also has pedal edema, patient has pleural effusion, bilateral, and the serum albumin is low, then I would presume it is nutritional. But if there is no pedal edema, there is no pleural effusion, serum albumin is also normal, and there is just ascites, then I would suspect that it is metastatic. And then yes, I would tap it and send it for cytology.
Make out. Please switch off your mics. I can't make out who's speaking.
Mrs. Sinha के relative को पटना में छोड़ के जा रहे हैं.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you, sir, finally. And with this, I would invite Dr. Suresh to start the panel discussion. And you have actually made his life very difficult. There isn't much left to discuss there. So Suresh, please take over.
No, I'm sure there are many issues which need further discussions. Yeah, please, Suresh, start. Yes.
Are you able to see my screen, sir?
Not yet, Suresh.
Okay.
Sorry. Your slides, if you want.
Sir, are you able to get it?
Yeah. Maximize kar do.
Yes.
Yeah, done. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. As already Dr. B.K. Kapoor have beautifully described the CAGB in detail. So without wasting any time, I'm coming to the panel discussion about the overview of carcinoma GB. A brief introduction about the GBC is an uncommon but a highly fatal malignancy, and GBC carries a poor prognosis because it diagnosed at the advanced stage because of its anatomical location and usually with the ambiguous symptoms when it presents. And worldwide, GBC it found that wherever the prevalence of polylithasis is high, the incidence of GB gallbladder cancer is high in that area. In worldwide, it's seen in South American countries like Bolivia, Ecuador have a high rate of gallbladder cancer. In India, it is seen in high incidence is seen in northern India, as northern India have a high cases of gallbladder stone disease. And globally, the burden of biliary tract cancer has been increasing. And further, incidence of GBC steadily increases with age, but it has found that incidence has also been increasing in the younger age, and women are affected more than the male. And it is also found GBC more common in white as compared to black people, and Dr. B.K. Kapoor already discussed the more seen in the Asian people. I'm coming to the first case capsule. This is a 54-year-old female with BMI 25, and She has a performance status is 0, and she had a new complaint of onset of dyspepsia, epigastric pain, abdomen from the last 1.5 months. She never had any nausea, vomiting, jaundice, and fever. And on examination, it's clean, almost normal, like abdomen is soft, no distant lymph node, no neck lymph node. And she was further evaluated with ultrasound abdomen, and it showed an eccentric thickening of GB fundus. So I'm asking first question by Dr. Pankaj that after having a brief discussion about brief things about clinical examination and ultrasound, there is eccentric thickening. What will be your next step?
Normally, Dr. Suresh, this is a very common presentation, what we see in our practice. So obviously the next thing to go for would be a CCT abdomen, a contrast enhanced CT abdomen, to further characterize or further look at the findings of the ultrasound.
Sir, I would like to ask which CT you recommend. Either it a triphasic CT or just CECT abdomen?
Normally we go for a triphasic CECT because that will help not only the characterization of the lesion as well as the arterial anatomy, because that will be required later on. So we go for a triphasic CT.
So even NCCN guideline, ISMO guidelines also recommend the triphasic CT. And triphasic CT show the polypoidal mass. It can show thickening. It can show the liver involvement and suspected lymph node and ascites and any peritoneal or omental deposit. So it will help us to make the staging. I would like to ask Dr. Rakesh that when will you recommend and what are the indications for MRI or MRI with MRC? Dr. Rakesh.
Dr. Shingla, usually we prefer CCT abdomen triple page, but sometimes in ultrasound there is symmetrical thickening of gallbladder with a stone impacted in neck, maybe suspicion of Mersey syndrome. Then in that case we can go with MRI with MRCP. But any advantage other than that, any advantage of MRI over CT is not very definite.
Sir, if you have to choose one among the triphasic CT or MRI with MRCP, what will be your choice and why?
My choice is triphasic CT. Reason is diagnosis is one thing. First, second is if there is any portal vein involvement, arterial involvement, we can accurately see through the CT scan, triphasic CT scan. In MRI, if good quality MRI is available, that is equally good. But my preference is CCT triphasic. Third important thing is I can read and can plan surgical planning. I can do my surgical planning according to viewing the CT scan. But I am very poor in MRI, so my preference is actually CCT because I can see. That is the main reason actually.
Even I find that most of the surgeons are more comfortable with CT scan.
Exactly.
So Suresh, I'll put it this way that perhaps these are not investigations which are, alternative to each other. CECT is the first in our practice. CECT is the first investigation that is to be done, and MRCP or MRI cannot replace a CECT. MRI is done for a different purpose.
Sir, can you please elaborate more about this, Dr. Pankaj?
MRI, so normally we always go for a CCT abdomen. MRI is only done when the patient is jaundiced. I have to evaluate and do surgery, which rarely we do in a jaundiced patient. A suspected carcinoma gallbladder with jaundice, we do not operate upfront.
Oh. So in equivocal cases, as Dr. Pankaj said, GBC with obstructive jaundice, you can go for MRI with the MRCP.
I may not agree. I may not agree with Dr. Pankaj. Because MRCP, if patient on clinic, if on biochemical investigation, if you have jaundice, why you need that? You can sit on CT scan. You can get your visibility.
Dr. Rakesh, Dr. Rakesh, can I just come in? Dr. Rakesh, Dr. Suresh did not get my point clearly. I said in a jaundice patient, the suspected CKGB with jaundice patient, we do not operate upfront. So there is no question of
Yeah.
MRCP.
Yeah.
We get an MRCP only
Exactly.
if we contemplate surgery,
Yeah.
which is rarely done.
Because it, thank you.
My next question to Dr. Swapnil. Dr. Swapnil, do you recommend to your patient CT chest routinely?
So, not as a routine, but yeah, in patients with having a higher radiological suspicion, we would definitely recommend a CT chest to evaluate the lung fields.
So NCCN guideline basically recommends NCCN both ESMO guidelines recommend chest CT for GBC.
Suresh, we can have more views here about CT chest.
Yeah.
Dr. Nikhil, in our practice, we always go for a chest imaging in any suspected CAGB. We normally like to get a whole body PET CT for these patients, and if for any purpose of either a financial reason or some logistic, we go for an NCCT chest. But we always screen the CT. We always screen the chest.
And what is the practice of Dr. Rakesh?
Usually we don't do. Usually, but we only used to do X-ray chest. Otherwise, CT chest is usually when there is some suspicious pathology in X-ray, or when there is a heavy lymph nodal disease in the CT abdomen. Then only used to evaluate chest. Otherwise, we don't.
And what would sir do, Dr. Kapoor, sir? I think
my current practice is not to do it, but I presume and I believe that it should be done, because as I have been saying again and again, it's a very aggressive malignancy, and we know that CT chest in general has better sensitivity to pick up metastasis as compared to a chest X-ray. So I think ideally, theoretically speaking, it should be done, but I don't think we have any evidence for it. I'm just saying it based on the biology of the disease.
I'm coming to the next question to all the panelists. They can give their input for my next question. Is there any role of endoscopic ultrasound in GBC gallbladder cancer?
If I may speak. Yeah, so I think that there is a role for endoscopic ultrasound, and specifically in those cases, without having any preoperative tissue diagnosis, and if we are contemplating a potential difficult dissection, some hepatic resection and we do need to be sure that it is a malignancy, and we would not want to venture in with a difficult resection in a benign case. So in those cases, and if attempted FNAC or a biopsy with a image guided intervention has not been successful, then EOS can be a potential source of a guided tissue diagnosis. So in those cases, or in cases having an isolated photocaval lymph nodes, EOS guided tissue diagnosis can be helpful at times.
so. How is it going to help? So isolated photocaval lymph node. So you mean periportal lymph node, right?
Right.
So if we are planning neoadjuvant, is that what you mean?
Correct. It can help us triage the patients to neoadjuvant therapy selectively.
Correct.
My next question to Dr. Pankaj, that do you routinely recommend these days PET CT for your patients of having gallbladder cancer?
Dr. Suresh, I told you we routinely advise a PET CT for staging gallbladder cancer in our patients. The data is emerging. Swapnil himself has published, I think, a paper on PET CT in gallbladder cancer. So data is emerging, very solid. The gallbladder cancer is FDG avid, and gallbladder cancer is an aggressive malignancy. We do not want to go into a futile surgery in a patient who has got a metastasis. So in our practice, we routinely recommend PET CT for all our patients.
My next question to you, that if you are recommending PET CT, are you recommending integrated triphasic PET CT, or first you get the triphasic PET CT, then go to the PET CT?
So normally what happens, Dr. Suresh, the scenario in clinics is different. So if I know pre-hand on ultrasound, I'll go for a triphasic, and most of the centers at present are having a CCT with a PET scanner. But unfortunately, it does not happen in practice. The practice, what happens, the patient comes with the CECT. So we look at the CECT and then we go for a PET-CT.
Okay.
So if I frame this question slightly differently, Dr. Garg, so if the patient has come with CT scan, and if he has an early disease on CT scan, would you still go for PET-CT?
I would. So most of the time, so what do you mean by either the patient? So there are two scenarios of patients that we see. The one is after like incidental gallbladders for a revision, and the other group would be in upfront. So in all those patients, considering the aggressiveness of the tumor, we go for a whole body PET-CT. And I told you, like for any other reason, like logistics, financial, then perhaps we do not go for a PET-CT, but at least we scan the chest there. And we go for an NCCT chest.
Fine.
So I'm just briefing about the PET-CT. Most of the gallbladder cancers are FDA avid, but still the role of PET-CT in case of gallbladder cancer is unclear, and it's emerging whether to PET-CT should be done or not. NCCN clearly don't recommend the PET-CT, but emerging data is coming. PET-CT should be done for staging purpose. And various studies have shown that it has higher positive predictive value for detection of regional lymph node, and a higher sensitivity for detecting distant lymph node also. And various studies like Caribou and Petrovsky have shown that it has altered the management in 17 to 23% of the patients. A recent article from Rajiv Gandhi Hospital by Dr. Shivendra also shown that it has changed the management approximately in 1/4 of the all resectable GBC patient and 1/3 of our locally advanced patient. So I'm coming back to my patient, and we have done with the triple phase CT. It has showed the contracted gallbladder with subtle mural thickening fungal region.
Dr. Kapoor.
I just wanted to make one comment that for the sake of students, I think I would like to correct that statement that the role of FDG PET in gallbladder cancer is unclear. I think there is evidence emerging of a role for gallbladder cancer. So if I were an MCH or DNB student and I am asked, I would say that there is some evidence and in favor of doing a PET scan as a routine in gallbladder cancer, primarily because of the aggressive biology, and second, because in presence of metastasis, whether it is extra-abdominal or intra-abdominal, any surgical procedure, as Pankaj also said, is going to be futile. So I would just like to slightly correct that statement. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So,
Dr. Suresh, can I say something to what Dr. Kapoor sir has just said? We have to rely on our data. It's our own disease, and a lot of data is emerging from India regarding this. What NCCN is saying, we cannot go by what the NCCN says, at least about gallbladder cancer.
So that's why I put up the paper from India, the recent paper from Rajiv Gandhi.
That's really commendable.
Yes.
Yeah, I fully agree with Pankaj. Not a very diplomatic statement which I am going to make, but a lot of people who are in NCCN committees probably see one gallbladder cancer a year.
So I'm coming back to my patient, and in triple phase CT, it showed a contracted gallbladder with subtle mural thickening. In the fundal region, there is no lymphadenopathy, no ascites, and no different mets. And whole body PET-CT also showed contracted gallbladder with metabolic smooth wall thickening, no definite evidence of any metabolic active disease anywhere else. So my question next to is Dr. Pankaj again, that how do you differentiate xanthogranulomatous cholecystitis or chronic cholecystitis having a wall thickening versus a gallbladder cancer having wall thickening?
Dr. Suresh, this question I have been asking the radiologist so many times at every conference and whenever I meet him. Can you differentiate xanthogranulomatous cholecystitis from gallbladder cancer with 100% surety? The answer is no. So for all practical purposes, whatever they say, all the signs about in CT, either 90% or 85% or 95%. For a given patient, as a surgeon, I have to decide whether I am 100% sure or not. So it is always that we go for a radical resection in these patients. So I ask the radiologist, you tell me, can you exclude the possibility of gallbladder cancer in this given patient? They have to give me the answer yes or no. and I know in 99% of the time, or maybe 100%, they'll say no. Then I say, okay, I'll go ahead with resection.
So,
So for all
Dr.
practical
Garg,
purposes, you cannot differentiate.
so you would agree with the Lucknow approach that anticipatory extended cholecystectomy,
Sir,
or you do a radical resection in all the
No,
patients?
so this is something that I have been actually venturing in for some time now, and we have done a quite cases where we have done this Lucknow approach, and they have removed the gallbladder with a liver wedge. But the main problem with this is the availability of the pathologist for frozen section.
That's
Many a
not the
times
case.
they also give a very diplomatic report. So their report is actually, so they say, to be correlated or, cannot be seen. Otherwise, if I have a trust on pathologist and pathologist tells me clearly that this is not cancer, this approach is quite valid. This is what I feel.
Yeah, very valid point. And Dr. Swapnil, what would you do if the tumor there is locally advanced? So say it looks like xantho on CT, but it's involving the duodenum.
So in such cases, we would definitely go for a preoperative tissue diagnosis. If we feel that the resection will not just be a standard radical cholecystectomy and may involve an extra organ resection, be it a duodenum, why not? So in that case, in those cases, we would go for a tissue diagnosis.
Totally agree. Somebody would disagree with that?
Yeah, I will disagree with that. by doing tissue diagnosis, what will offer next? That is the question. If since GBC is not very chemosensitive, so main treatment modality is resection. So if duodenum is involved and we can perform segmental resection or base resection, it is better to do base resection along or segmental resection with extended cholecystectomy than getting tissue biopsy and offer other treatment. This is my view.
In a benign disease?
How it is possible to differentiate is benign or malignant? Radiologically, it is involved. On table, if it feels it is involved, so it is involved.
Dr. Kapoor has a point to make. Sir.
Unfortunately, we can never say that it is benign. We can say that it is malignant,
exactly,
but we can never say it is benign. So that is why, to some extent, I will agree with what Rakesh said, that if my hunch is that, or the CT findings suggest that I can resect it, even if with colonic resection, on a high suspicion of malignancy, I will probably do a resection. The only place where I will get a preoperative tissue diagnosis is when I want to use neoadjuvant treatment, when I think it is possibly unresectable. So that is where the art of medicine comes. You have to decide what is your assessment. If I think it is possibly resectable, I will operate without a tissue diagnosis. If I think it is possibly unresectable, I will prove that it is malignant, give neoadjuvant treatment, and then operate upon it.
So if you think that this is probably malignant, and if it's involving duodenum and it's malignant, then I would be happier probably giving a neoadjuvant approach, because it makes it a T4 or T3 disease. T3. And if it turns out to benign, probably we can, sir, like imaging and operative findings, sometimes we are more wiser during surgery. Okay.
Yeah.
I would contest that. I won't contest that.
See, as Pankaj said, if there is a suspicion of malignancy, you have to treat it as malignant. I cannot presume that it is benign and do a conservative resection, an R2 resection.
Yes,
Dr. Nikhil, so what we do is whenever we we feel that on CT, we have to resect the duodenum, we take it as a locally advanced. We do not operate. We go for a biopsy and we believe in an NACT in these patients.
That is negative.
So if that is negative, so that is the only situation where the repeated attempts to get a tissue biopsy have failed. So we cannot give a neoadjuvant chemotherapy. So this is what I was telling when we published our paper on 148 cholecystectomies. There were only 2 patients with jaundice where we had to operate because we could not get a tissue biopsy.
So the question I asked you, Dr. Garg, was specifically about these patients, like you have made a genuine attempt at tissue diagnosis, which is negative, and
yes,
you have a hunch that it could be benign. So the question was specifically about that, like maybe
Nikhil, even if it is malignant, I feel, because I cannot go further, I cannot move further unless I have a biopsy. So then we are left with no option other than going in.
No, okay, fine. Yeah. So we can proceed. This is getting. endoscopy. So Saurav Singla has asked that duodenum involvement tissue diagnosis by endoscopy. Somebody wants to take that.
Yeah, the problem is that endoscopy will be positive only when the mucosa is involved. And we know that this tumor is coming from outside. A normal endoscopy or negative duodenal biopsy does not mean that duodenum is not involved. So, and CT we know is a very poor, has a poor sensitivity to detect duodenal or colonic involvement. So in many cases, this is found only at surgery. And that is where what Dr. Anil Agrawal says, that if pancreas is not involved, which should be obvious on CT scan, then one can attempt a sleeve or a segmental and still have a R0 margin.
So these segmental resections, sir, are very, very difficult in inflammatory cases. I mean, you can do a segmental resection in malignancy, but when you open a patient of xantho, the things are very, very difficult there. And there, I mean, either you close it and say unresectable, or probably you end up doing a, if it is malignant, then probably an R1 resection. So I think they are doing a morbid radical surgery where your tissue diagnosis is negative and your hunch is that it is benign. Those cases are something very rare, a very, very difficult decision making in the operating table itself.
Yeah, I remember a couple of such cases where I went in and I could not possibly differentiate between malignancy and either acute or xantho inflammation. And obviously the intraoperative FNAC was negative. So I don't know whether it is malignant or benign. So there are two ways that you can handle this. If your hunch is more towards malignancy or acute inflammation, then just leave it alone, come out and see the clinical course of the patient. If the clinical course is of inflammation, that means the things settle down, then you can go in after 4, 6, 8 weeks after further investigation. But if it doesn't, then again, you try to get a tissue diagnosis, because you cannot, nobody will give neoadjuvant treatment without a tissue diagnosis, unfortunately. On the other hand, if operatively my hunch is that this looks more like xantho, then what I would do, I would open the gallbladder, take out the stones, remove as much of the gallbladder as possible, which means a very, very limited partial cholecystectomy without creating a biliary, duodenal or colonic fistula. So not touching these organs at all, even leaving part of the gallbladder on these organs, on the hepatoduodenal ligament. And in such cases, 9 out of 10 times, it should turn out to be benign when you have done the cure, because once the stones are removed, xantho inflammation settles. In 1 out of 10 cases, if it is malignancy, you have done an unnecessary, maybe a harmful procedure, but the only precaution you have to take is that you don't create a fistula, either enteric or biliary.
Agreed, sir, probably. And one more question here about specifically about this anticipatory extended cholecystectomy. So, I mean, there is now many or more papers on radical cholecystectomy by laparoscopic approach. We can debate, but I do feel that anticipatory extended cholecystectomy is especially well suited for laparoscopic procedure. I would want view of panelists here.
Yeah, so when we started this at that time, we did not kind of do, and we did not believe in laparoscopic extended cholecystectomy, but then we had to change our view, because now there is evidence both from Dr. Anil Agrawal and Dr. Han from Korea and many other centers that they have reported equally good long-term results with laparoscopic extended or radical cholecystectomy also. So in the last few cases, yes, my colleagues at SGPGI, we did AEC also laparoscopically. 2 precautions one has to take. Don't hold the gallbladder. Make sure that gallbladder doesn't open and there is no bile spill, and extract the specimen in a bag, protecting the wound.
Krish.
This we have already discussed about various strategies to differentiate gallbladder carcinoma versus xanthogranulomatous thickening. Dr. B.K. Kora already discussed that in the case of xanthogranulomatous cholecystectomy, there is more diffuse thickening and there is the intramural air.
One more thing which Dr. T.D. Yadav from PGI Chandigarh has shown, and I think he has published it also, that if the thickening is more than about 10 millimeter, then the chances that it will be malignant are higher. Although anecdotally, we all have seen even 3 centimeter thick gallbladders turning out to be xanthogranulomatous cholecystitis.
Even I try to dig out more paper about this gensogranular thickening versus GBC thickening, and I came out with one paper that even MRI can help us to differentiate GBC thickening with the gensogranulometer thickening, and there is more diffuse restriction are more frequently seen in the thickening of gallbladder cancer. So my next question to Dr. Swapnil, that after making all the staging and staging with the imaging, what will be your next step about as a staging laparoscopy? Will you consider staging laparoscopy in cases of GBC gallbladder cancer patient?
We do put in a scope as a routine prior to proceeding with resection, because definitely at least various series, depending upon, have shown numbers ranging from 15 to 20%, even 25%, where futile laparotomies could be avoided for when a patient is taken up for a gallbladder resection.
I think staging laparoscopy is a definitive step in the while managing the GBC. As we have seen, various papers have come up with that it has altered the management and management of the cases of GBC, especially the patient who have unresectable or disseminated gallbladder cancers. I'm putting the paper of Dr. Nilkumar Agarwal, and we showed that they have staging laparoscopy have obviated the need of laparotomy in 55.9% of the patient who have the unresectable disease.
Yes.
My next question first to Dr. B.K. Kapoor, that when did you consider neoadjuvant chemotherapy in cases of gallbladder cancer?
Yeah, as I mentioned very briefly, that there is little soft evidence emerging of the role of neoadjuvant therapy in locally advanced, not lymph nodal, not metastatic gallbladder cancer. But the problem is that unlike pancreatic cancer, where this entity of borderline pancreatic cancer, which again different guidelines define it differently, is kind of more or less well established, we don't have any definition of borderline resectable gallbladder cancer. And that is because it depends on the philosophy. If I have an aggressive approach, even pancreatic or duodenal or colonic or extensive liver involvement is not unresectable. On the other hand, if I have a conservative approach, then this makes it unresectable or borderline resectable. I have not used neoadjuvant chemotherapy as a trial or as a protocol, but in some patients who have locally advanced disease, I have used it more to assess the biology of the disease. Because if you give some neoadjuvant treatment and still the disease progresses or remains stable, then probably you are dealing with a poor biology tumor, and this patient, in spite of whatever surgery we might do, may not do well. On the other hand, if there is response, then you can probably go in and try to resect it. So I would say possibly unresectable, locally advanced gallbladder cancer, there may be a role of neoadjuvant treatment. Although you have to remember, as Pankaj already said, that if there is jaundice, that it involves as the first step a biliary drainage to bring the bilirubin down and then give neoadjuvant treatment.
Dr. Suresh, I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
What we are calling locally advanced, when we on CT scan see resectable disease and put a staging laparoscope, your above 50% patient turned out to be unresectable. And when you see locally advanced disease on CT scan, so think how many patients of those could be a stage 4, which we don't know actually. So
that brings us to the question,
what we are
do a staging laparoscopy before giving them neoadjuvant? Is that what you're trying to suggest?
Yeah.
That should be standard practice,
if
right?
we are planning for neoadjuvant therapy, then we should first do a staging laparoscopy, then do, because many of them might be actually, we are thinking about locally advanced, but actually it is a stage 4 disease.
Yeah, I completely agree with Dr. Rakesh, and this is what the trial is also going on in India in gastric cancer also, that before starting NSCT, put in a scope, look for whether it's a peritoneal dissemination or not. It's definitely a good idea to put in a scope before you start or before you send the patient for NSCT in locally advanced gallbladder cancer. When there is already a peritoneal dissemination, you'll get to know. So, see, Dr. Rakesh, the point is actually why we do not do is, because suppose there is a disease there, it will be a palliative chemotherapy the patient will receive. So it will be just a matter of semantics. And
Yeah.
if it is a locally advanced and we have not put in a scope, you give 3 cycles of chemotherapy, the small nodules will become large. And when you do a repeat imaging, they will become evident. But I do agree with you that we should put in a scope before we send the patients for NACT.
So regarding this staging laparoscopy before NACT, so obviously we don't have much data in gallbladder, but we all agree from our experience in gastric cancer and the data which we have shared so far, that most of them will be metastatic, that we should do staging laparoscopy. But most of the corporate setting doesn't allow repeated interventions. So sometimes, despite understanding this, we mostly will have to go for neoadjuvant chemotherapy without doing a staging laparoscopy.
Even government hospital does not permit because of the patient load actually.
Yeah, so this logistics probably will.
Dr. Nikhil, this is what I said. So that is why we perhaps don't do it. Because
Yeah.
if there is already a dissemination, you give 3 cycles and the disease will become large and it will be evident on a repeat scan.
Yeah, perfectly all right. We get that point. So the only thing which
this is what we are, Dr. Kapoor just said, that the tumor biology, this is what the tumor biology we are assessing.
But we should know what we are doing, what we are getting
Exactly.
into. Yeah.
But some patients with gallbladder cancer do get 2 staging laparoscopies done. For example, if you are doing a portal vein embolization, then before portal vein embolization, and then just before surgery. Similarly, if you are doing biliary drainage, or as we discussed, neoadjuvant treatment, some people would do it before that, and then just before. But just before surgery has to be there.
Has to be there.
Dr. Kapoor, sir, I want to frame one question and I want your opinion. Suppose a patient is having a gallbladder cancer, it is colon is involved, and I did a staging laparoscopy and I found there is nowhere metastasis nowhere, and this is locally advanced tumor and having no different metastasis. Now, what should be my next step? Should I go for neoadjuvant chemo or I have to go upfront surgery?
I think if it is colonic involvement only, I would do an extended cholecystectomy with a segmental colonic resection straight away.
Sir, you mean on one side, sir, we are saying locally advanced tumor, we can think about neoadjuvant chemo. So do I have to think about neoadjuvant chemo in this setting as it is locally advanced involving the colon?
No, locally advanced gallbladder cancer, I would divide into resectable and possibly unresectable.
Unresectable.
Colonic, commental, liver involvement is resectable. On the other hand, involvement of duodenum, pancreas, hepatoduodenal ligament, probably possibly unresectable. So I would divide it into these 2 subgroups. So the situation which you described, I personally would straight away go ahead with upfront surgery.
So, sir, what are you trying to suggest? What I understand from is that you wouldn't want to give the morbidity of surgery to a patient whom you think is not likely to benefit. So you're just basically assessing biology before doing a morbid surgery.
When I give neoadjuvant treatment?
Yes. So if the surgery, I mean, so you like if it's a colonic involvement or a organ involvement where you can get away with the surgery with less morbidity, then you would probably do it.
Yes.
So how many?
Personally, I am not in agreement with even the current staging of gallbladder cancer, and maybe at some stage I would suggest some changes. We had suggested some changes earlier also. I feel that jaundice should be included in the staging of gallbladder cancer, the point which Pankaj also.
Yes, sir.
Right. So what is the approach of other panelists regarding neoadjuvant chemo?
So at Tata Memorial Hospital, neoadjuvant chemotherapy over the years has been promoted quite a lot. We have just recently sent our report of 1300 experience on 1300 gallbladder cancers for publication. So we are yet to receive news on that. But over the years, what we have seen, we tried dividing our experience over 10-12 years into time segments, and what we saw that the use of neoadjuvant chemotherapy has become more popular, and as sir has said, rightly for the one basic reason to select the biology for and to guide the patients to appropriate treatment. So
Swapnil, what sir suggested that he will select the biology only in patients which would require a morbid surgery.
Correct.
Right now, if the patient doesn't require. So if you ask about TMH approach, so TMH would give neoadjuvant even for a positive node.
Yes. So
Right
this is
now,
what we have been
operating a
practicing.
yeah. So operating a positive node doesn't give you any additional morbidity. So
I would
there
agree.
we
So
have to have the belief that this is going to increase survival of the patient.
This is what our data has shown, that when we divided the patients based on what is called as TMH criteria, where even those patients having local regional lymph nodes were classified as locally advanced, and the patients who were operated after when only the patients of locally advanced gallbladder cancer were evaluated. So what we saw that the patients having operated after neoadjuvant chemotherapy, they did better survival wise as compared to the ones prior to.
So are we talking about the whole cohort, or are we talking about the patients who were operated?
The patients who underwent surgery.
Yes, but wouldn't the better way of looking at it would be the whole cohort?
So precisely neoadjuvant chemotherapy is helping us here only select out those patients who would eventually fare bad in the long run, and you preclude any, or you rather exclude any curative surgery or radical resection in those cases of locally advanced cancers after neoadjuvant chemotherapy.
Dr. Swapnil, I want to ask, are you following this TMH criteria at your center? I mean, are you really giving neoadjuvant chemo, as Dr. Nikhil asked, like
yes.
having?
We follow it religiously because we also have a trial running for the same, and for locally advanced cancers, and it is done. And many of the things which we discussed, like staging laparoscopy prior to starting neoadjuvant chemotherapy, we do it as a part of the trial protocol, and we do religiously follow it.
Right. So Swapnil, there's a question from audience. Saurav has asked what chemotherapy regimen is used.
So it's usually gemcitabine based gemcitabine cisplatin or gemcitabine oxaliplatin based chemotherapy.
NCCN guideline have not really recommended any preferred regime for neoadjuvant, and they have given some combinations of chemotherapies that can be prescribed as a neoadjuvant in cases of GBC. My next question is to Dr. Rakesh, and what should I have to do next? I have done staging lab.
Yeah.
In this case, regarding this, the case I have already discussing that having an eccentric thickening in gallbladder, and there is no disease anywhere else. And I had done with staging laparoscopy, and there is what is the next step now?
If the expertise is available, we can do extended cholecystectomy laparoscopically, or preferably, because I am not doing much, only 1 or 2 cases we have done laparoscopic extended cholecystectomy. So I will do laparotomy, reassess the whole abdomen, reassess the para-aortic region, aortocaval region, and then we'll proceed for surgery. We'll look the thickening, what it is look like. But because in your patient, a stone is not there, thickening was there in the a stone was not there on ultrasound, thickening is there, concentric thickening in the CT scan. So we will presume it is malignancy, carcinoma GB, and we'll proceed further for the extended cholecystectomy.
Okay, surgery, Dr. Rakesh have already discussed. So, oncological principle are same for every cancer surgery. That is the adequate lymph node yield and adequate margin we have to achieve. So, Dr. Rakesh already discussed that lab is equally good to the open. I want to ask Dr. Pankaj that how often do you do lab surgeries for CAGB?
No, sorry, Dr. Suresh, I don't do lab radical cholecystectomy, so I don't have any experience. Sorry.
Okay, what about Dr. Swapnil? What is your experience about laparoscopic surgery?
We are not doing it, sir, yet. Still
Dr. Suresh?
Yes. Yes, sir. I am listening.
Yeah. I have done just 1 extended cholecystectomy, complete extended cholecystectomy with liver resection as well as lymph node dissection. So only 1 case, and the case was just typical what you are order your case. Just thickening, and then on biopsy it was T2 lesion. So just did one case, but in future I will try more.
Dr. Rakesh, just on the lighter note, I would like to ask that do you want to say it is extended cholecystectomy or did a radical cholecystectomy? I mean, you had done lymph node dissection also.
Yeah, I did radical dissection, lymphadenectomy also. So it is radical cholecystectomy actually. Term is interchangeably used by different writers. So I don't know what is proper term, but I think it should be radical cholecystectomy because lymphadenectomy was done.
Sir, Dr. Rakesh, how often do you feel difficulty? I mean, you have done one case. Do you feel any difficulty doing dissection of hepatoduodenal, especially posterior superior hepatoduodenal lymph node? I mean retroduodenal and lymph node along the common hepatic artery. As Dr. B.K. Kaur has already said that we in India and in Japan we take these lymph nodes.
Yeah, retroduodenal lymph node is not difficult. Common hepatic lymph node, hepatoduodenal ligament 12 and 12P is not difficult. Difficult portion is tissue between CBD and portal vein and posterior to 12C. I mean posterior to bile duct. That is more difficult because we used to do via with harmonic. So it is difficult. Very scared of the bile duct injury at that time. So right, 12P is not difficult. 8 is not difficult. Even 8A and 8T both are easy. Celiac, right celiac was difficult somewhat, and 13 group level is also not difficult. That is easy, but difficult is 12C. 12C is really difficult.
I would like to hear something from Dr. B.K. Kaur also about this laparoscopic, I mean, gallbladder cancer surgery.
Yeah, while I respect the data and the opinion of the GV Pant Hospital group, I personally feel that because of the biological aggressiveness, and again the same thing, I feel that the patient with early resectable gallbladder cancer should be offered the best chance of cure without any problems. I personally still do and believe in open, extended or radical, whatever you want to call it, cholecystectomy.
Can I add something, Dr. Suresh?
I want to come in here.
Just a line I want to add. The extent of surgery should not change whether you do open or laparoscopic.
Yes, sir.
So, Suresh, and I have done a couple of laparoscopic extended cholecystectomy, and I would, for the benefit of students and everyone, would want to emphasize that if you can replicate your open surgery laparoscopically,
exactly
step by step, how much margin you are going to take in liver, how much lymph nodes you are going to remove, you are going to bear out all the arteries, you are going to bear out the head of pancreas from posteriorly. Please go ahead and do it. But if if I'm doing it laparoscopically, I can leave one node there, or I can do away with this dissection. Please open and do a good job there. So I wouldn't do laparoscopic for any advanced case, or if I anticipate any difficulty during my laparoscopic procedure. And even when I'm doing laparoscopic procedure, if I encounter difficulty in taking out a node, no questions, open and do the procedure. So if you can replicate your open laparoscopically, if you have developed that much skills, yes, otherwise open is the best approach.
I think Nikhil has made this very clear, and I'm really thankful, and I really appreciate, because there's so many students. The message should be very clear. The extent of surgery should not change whether you do open or laparoscopic.
Exactly. So that message is loud and clear. No compromises in quality of surgery. Patient can stay in hospital for 2 more days. That's okay.
Okay. I just want to ask one more thing. Who is using Kelly clamp technique for liver resection? I mean, everybody using CUSA, or somebody also using this Kelly clamp technique?
Oh, Dr. Suresh, I still do this clamp brushing method.
Dr. Pankaj, you muted yourself.
Dr. Pankaj.
No, I was saying that we don't have a CUSA. We still the old timers doing the same clamp crushing.
And one more request, Suresh, you have to quickly wrap up.
Okay, sir. I'm good.
Yeah, but I agree with Pankaj that yes, if you have CUSA, you can and you may use it. But if you don't have, it doesn't mean that you cannot do a liver resection.
Yeah.
So I'm just putting this slide of paper of Dr. Nilkumar Agarwal, as Dr. B.K. Pura already said that we are expecting the, whatever they have presented, but I think most of the people are still doing open radical cholecystectomies.
Yeah.
So I'm coming to the surgery. Surgery, we have already discussed that we will go for extended radical cholecystectomy, and along with we have to do lymphadenectomy. And my next question is to Dr. Swapnil. Dr. Swapnil, do you routinely, do you do intra-autocaval lymph node sampling in every case, or how do you decide that you will go for intra-autocaval lymph node sampling, or you do in every case?
We usually do intra-autocaval lymph node sampling in more often than not. In every case, we would do it. But as Kapoor already said in the beginning, the intra-autocaval lymph node should be the one which really means intra-autocaval. That is, technically speaking, 16B1 lymph node, which should be targeted and which should be sampled. Sometimes the fat there can can confuse you between the retroduodenal retropancreatic node coming down, and if you take that as the intra-autocaval lymph node, that's not correct.
Okay. Dr. Pankaj, I want to ask one thing from you, that as we had discussed, even Dr. B.K. Kapoor had discussed that we go for intra-autocaval lymph node sampling. Do you really go for celiac lymph node sampling also, as we know that if intra-autocaval lymph nodes are there, it is metastatic disease.
We start the surgery with a staging laparoscopy, no metastasis. We mobilize, do cauterization, do intra-autocaval sampling. Non-metastatic, we go ahead and do surgery.
Sir, actually, I want to know why not celiac? Why we are not doing celiac? Why only intra-autocaval?
You see, the right side of the celiac are a part of an N2. This is what we believe in philosophy. This is our philosophy is. So for us, these are the N2 group of lymph nodes. We do not consider them as a metastasis, systemic metastasis.
Sir, agreed. Even, sir, left of the celiac we also take as a metastatic. And it is easily approachable also, that we can see celiac lymph node on the left side also. But Dr. B.K. Kapoor, sir, what is your opinion about that? Sampling of lymph node on the left side.
Dr. Kapoor has left.
No, sir, sorry, is here.
I'm holding on. So, yes, I agree that one should look at the celiac nodes. Although we do lymph node dissection up to the right of celiac axis, but if the node on the right side of celiac is positive, I suppose the prognosis will be poor. So celiac node, base of superior mesenteric vessels, and aortocaval nodes or para-aortic nodes, they are all probably equally bad. So I agree with you that it is much easier to look at the celiac or the base of superior mesenteric than to look at aortocaval. So they should be looked at first. If they are not there, then cauterize the duodenum and take out the aortocaval node or the aortocaval loose alveolar tissue. My dictum is that in gallbladder cancer, at every stage, clinical, imaging, laparoscopy, laparotomy, you have to find a reason not to operate or not to resect. Because if that reason is there and you don't find it, or you find it and you ignore it, your surgery is going to be futile.
Yes. So I'm just putting this paper again from Dr. Nilkumar Agarwal, and I'm sure that doing the intra-autocaval lymph node sampling have really altered the management and decision making. So my next question to Dr. Rakesh: how many lymph nodes do you really think need to be harvested in case of GBC, and why?
Recommendation is 15 lymph node actually. So we try to achieve that. That's all. And why we don't know.
Dr. Pankaj.
More important thing is I think drainage area, like hepatoduodenal ligament, retropancreatic, common hepatic, right celiac. This group should be excised, harvested.
Dr. Suresh, this is a question of philosophy, that what philosophy you believe in. This number business has come up from the US people who believe in berry picking. This has never come up from the eastern side, where we believe in a, you know,
Location.
in block lymphadenectomy. So if I do a complete lymphadenectomy and the number of lymph nodes turn out to be 6, I'm good, I'm happy. I have done my job. Okay, so you have to do a good-hearted job, do a complete lymphadenectomy, never look for the number of lymph nodes. You do your job, and then it is the job of the pathologist to get the numbers. So it is both the surgeons and the pathologist, and I never go by the numbers.
Yeah,
I
Kapoor
fully
sir,
agree. The question needs to be reframed. How many lymph nodes should be there in the specimen? Because no surgeon counts the lymph nodes. We do a lymphadenectomy. We remove all loose areolar fatty tissue. But the number of lymph nodes which the pathologist can identify tells you whether you have done an adequate regional clearance or not, and prognosis, decision for chemotherapy, and all those things.
So this question becomes
lymph nodes.
more relevant when you are seeing a patient which have been operated outside and you don't know about the quality of surgery. Now, whether you add adjuvant radiation or not, if you're not very sure about that center, then probably these kind of questions can help you. And on a lighter note, like what happens when we are operating and some of our colleagues will come in and say, "वो ना artery के ऊपर छोटा सा fat दिख रहा है, तुमने वो छोड़ दिया." So these are the kind of lymphadenectomies we would end up doing.
The next question by again Dr. Rakesh, but as we already discussed that we have to take the cystic lymph node and hepatoduodenal lymph node, then lymph node on this common hepatic artery and posterior pancreatic-duodenal lymph node. And Dr. B.K. Kapoor have already discussed that in Japan and in Asian country like India, we go for the regional lymph node like cystic, CBD, hepatic artery along the CHA, posterior pancreatic-duodenal, right ociliac. We consider it as a regional lymph node and we do a lymphadenectomy for that. But in the USA, the lymph node along the common hepatic and posterior pancreatic taken as a metastatic. So regional lymph node. So my next question to Dr. Swapnil, and when do you think that bile duct need to be resected in case of gallbladder cancer, Dr. Swapnil? I think Dr. Swapnil not here. It's a simple.
No, Dr. Suresh, if I can take this question, Swapnil is there?
Is there? He's there.
Yes.
So bile duct resection would mainly be indicated either for an adequate lymph nodal clearance in a very heavy lymph nodal burden, if we are proceeding with surgery, or secondly for a margin on the bile duct, especially in cases of GB neck cancers or in cases of incidental gallbladder cancers, when we are doing a revision surgery and we are not sure of the prior margin on the cystic duct. And so sometimes we would go ahead with a frozen section analysis of the revised cystic duct margin. But if not sure, we can definitely go ahead with a bile duct resection of the extrahepatic biliary tree and then a safe anastomosis.
Anybody else want to add something?
You see, about the bile duct resection, previously the philosophy was they used to do a routine bile duct resection. And the reason for doing a routine bile duct resection was to achieve a complete lymphadenectomy, so as to address the perineural invasion. And the third reason what the people used to believe is that if you do a good lymphadenectomy, there could be a vascular jeopardy to the bile duct and could cause stricture. So this was the philosophy, and the people were doing a routine bile duct resection. But as the evidence emerged, and now we know that routine bile duct resection does not help. So we at our center, what we follow is that we do a selective bile duct resection. And when do we do it? We do it if we have to achieve a good lymphadenectomy. There is a heavy, as the Swapnil said, heavy lymph node burden. And I feel I cannot achieve a good lymphadenectomy without taking off the bile duct, number one. Number two is if the bile duct margin is negative, is positive. The cystic duct margin is positive, I have to take it. Third, we do it in those patients who were jaundiced and have been given neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And after that, we do it. So perhaps these were the indications of doing a routine bile duct dissection, selective bile duct dissection in these patients. Or obviously, if there is a direct involvement, then you would do it. So
Okay,
for
sir.
us, these are the 4 indications of doing a bile duct resection.
Okay. So my next question to Dr. Swapnil about the liver wedge resection. You do liver wedge resection routinely or segmental resection of
We
segment
do
4B
a
and 5?
We do a non-anatomical wedge resection with an adequate 2 centimeter margin. Studies have shown that a non-anatomical resection with a clear margin is as good as segmental liver section of segment 4B and 5.
So in our, I'm just coming back to this case. We have done the standard radical cholecystectomy, and the final biopsy is adenocarcinoma that is poorly differentiated, and 3 out of 10 lymph nodes are positive for carcinoma, and final stage is PT2N1. And we have taken this patient for adjuvant chemotherapy, and our medical oncologists have given a Gemcis regime. So I'm not going in detail of the adjuvant chemotherapy. So my next question was approach to the thick wall gallbladder with low suspicion of carcinoma. And Dr. V.K. Kapoor has already discussed in detail. That is of Lucknow approach. That first you can go for standard cholecystectomy, send a sample for frozen. If it is positive, then you can go for lymphadenectomy. Otherwise, it's enough for the surgery. And this we can discuss a little about the pancreatic-duodenectomy in GBC. And I think a few words already by Dr. B.K. Kapoor, and this is that it is extremely the GBC with the involvement of the pancreas, and it's a very poor prognosis, and literature does not support any pancreatic-duodenectomy. Should I discuss more, or we have to wrap? Dr. Nikhil.
No, please wrap up.
Okay, sir.
It will kill me.
I
With
would.
this, you're done, Dr. Suresh?
Yes, sir, I'm done, sir.
Okay. So I would like to thank you very much, all the esteemed panelists, Swapnil, Suresh, Rakesh, Dr. Pankaj, Kapoor, sir. And this was, I mean, very, very enlightening discussion. We threadbare discussed everything, and we have been doing this program for some time now. And this, I mean, I get a lot of support from students. They write to me and tell me, I mean, this has been very helpful. So thanks for all the encouragement, and good night. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you,
We'll
Nikhil.
continue
Thank you.
with the gallbladder cancer. There are 3 more sessions. Next, we will discuss multimodal treatment. Then we'll discuss surgery. And there's one more. Okay, so we'll divide it into 4 exactly.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Nikhil. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. A wonderful discussion. Learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.